channel. February is Women in Horror Month. So for today's video, I've decided to talk about some of my favorite horror and thriller books written by women. Let's get into it, shall we? First up is Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. This is a story that's centered around a grieving mother whose son tragically died in a car accident. One night, when visiting his roadside memorial, she accidentally drops a bit of her blood onto his gravesite, and then later that night, she sees her son outside her house. Or is it? So this is a really moving story about grief and how far a person is willing to go to bring back somebody they love. I think this is the perfect read for fans of Pet Sematary. Next up is Trick or Treat by Richie Tankersley Cusick. So this is a 90s teen horror about a young girl who is going through a lot of changes. She has moved to a new town, a new house, she has a new stepmom and stepbrother, and she's also starting to get some really scary prank phone calls and weird stuff happening to her that just escalates. And eventually she discovers that the home that they're living in was previously home to a young girl who was murdered there. So this is a really fun, suspenseful teen mystery. It's got a little romance in it, but what I really like about this is that the author does an amazing job at making these characters feel like real teens, especially the female characters. I also think that the author is really great at creating these scenes and moments filled with so much dread and suspense, and it will just have you on the edge of your seat trying to figure out the mystery. Next is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. So this story centers on a young solicitor who is sent into this town to basically finish up the affairs of this old woman who passed away. And whenever he tells anybody in this town where he's going and who he's dealing with, they're all very standoffish and weird. It's like everybody in town is in on this secret and they don't let him know what it is. And then when he gets to this house, he realizes that it's haunted. This ghost story is so emotional and so atmospheric, and the setting of this house that's on a causeway, and at certain points of the day it becomes an island, so our main character gets trapped there. It's just so unsettling, and there's scenes in this that are extremely devastating and disturbing, and I just feel like Susan Hill does an excellent job at not only making you connect with our main character and feel for him and worry for his safety, but you also really emotionally connect with the ghost and feel for her. Next is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This thriller is centered on two estranged sisters who reunite after the death of one of their husbands, brings forth some horrifying family secrets. This story is bleak, this story is dark and disturbing, and it has some extreme violence against women. So do not go into this book lightly. But what I loved most about this book is the relationship between the two sisters. It's very raw and real and troubled, and I just loved watching them grow and work through their differences while dealing with this horrific thing that you can't even imagine being a part of. And Karen Slaughter has a way with just making you feel every bit of pain that is going on with these characters. The story moves extremely quickly, and it has some shocking revelations that will have your jaw on the floor. Next is Friend or Deadly Friend by Diana Henstell. This story is centered around a young genius boy named Paul who he's kind of troubled and he's a bit of an outcast because of his intelligence. Everybody thinks he's weird, and he creates a robot who's basically his only friend until he and his mother move into this new town and he befriends the girl next door. Soon, tragedy strikes, the girl next door dies, and Paul decides he's going to bring her back to life. This story is so dark. It's centered on children, but it doesn't shy away from the disturbing content. I feel like the fact that it is centered on these kids who are going through these really horrifying situations, and they're put in these adult situations where they have to deal with death and loss and all of this stuff, it makes the story even more disturbing. And I think Diana Henstell is an excellent writer. There are some truly scary moments in this book that will take your breath away, and I just feel like these characters are so nuanced and there's a lot more to the story than just a boy bringing back one of his friends from the dead. It deals with loneliness and bullying, and it's just a really moving, sad read. Next is The Merciless by Daniel Vega. This story centers on a group of teenage girls who kidnap a classmate to give her an exorcism. But, you know, sometimes teenage girls have a little bit more to them than that, and these girls might have more things in store for this classmate. And I think this story is absolutely terrifying because I can actually see a group of teenage girls getting together like this and doing something like this. It doesn't seem that hard to believe. I think the story really does an excellent job of examining herd mentality, especially among teenagers who are in school. They have a lot more to prove. They're easily influenced, and this story is just, it's violent, it's bleak, and it's shocking. It's shocking. I did not expect it to go where it goes, and I had a lot of fun with this one. Next is When Darkness Loves Us by Elizabeth Engstrom. This is a book that was packaged as a Paperbacks from Hell, and it contains 2 novellas. But the story I'm talking about is the titular story, When Darkness Loves Us. It centers on a young pregnant woman who accidentally gets locked underground, and she has to survive. This story is bonkers. It goes places I didn't expect it to go, and it's horrifying because you're following this main character who is in complete darkness. She can't see in front of her. She doesn't know what's around her, what's down there, and she's pregnant. Not only does she have to fight for her own life, she has to fight for her baby's life. And it's just super claustrophobic and unnerving. I felt like I couldn't breathe at certain points, and I just love that. These emotions are what I look for in a horror story. And I got similar vibes to The Descent. This is definitely those same vibes. Underground, claustrophobic, mystery, you don't know what's going on and you don't know where it's going, and I think it's just such a fun, bizarre horror story. Next is None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. This young adult novel is a mix between Silence of the Lambs meets Mindhunter, and it centers on 2 teenage FBI recruits. They've got some tragic past, and they're recruited by the FBI for their tragic pasts to interview teenage serial killers. And during all this, there is an active murder investigation going on, and they're pulled into it to help. And one of the ways they help is they're called in to interview a Hannibal-like teenage serial killer. This book is perfect for fans of true crime. It absolutely felt like an episode of Mindhunter. I loved the scenes where they're interviewing these serial killers and you're learning about their minds, their psychology, and learning about their crimes. It's just super fascinating to me, and the story doesn't shy away from the graphic content of these kills, and some of the stuff that happens is really shocking, and the Hannibal-like teenage serial killer is just so fun to read from, and it's just so much fun. I love this book. I read it in like a day, and it's just excellent. It's excellent. Next is Night Film by Marisha Pessel. This is a neo-noir crime thriller about an investigative journalist who is looking into the strange and untimely death of a 24-year-old girl named Ashley Cordova and her legendary reclusive horror cult filmmaker father. And he teams up with these 2 unlikely people that he doesn't really know, and they go on this bizarre journey. It's trippy, it's weird, it's just very dreamlike at times, and I just remember not knowing where it was going or what was really happening, and I just like that feeling of just being super confused and not really having things nicely wrapped up. Loved how the story centered on this cult horror film director because I could just connect it with real horror directors that I know and love, and just think about the horror community and how passionate fans can be. I like how the story also incorporated a lot of different mixed media. You're reading interviews and seeing newspaper clippings and stuff like that. It just made it a whole experience. I think it's just weird, trippy fun. And lastly, lastly, I'm going to recommend Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is a young adult novel centered on a young girl named Sadie who embarks on a journey of revenge to get justice for the murder of her younger sister. And during all this, she disappears. And a famous podcaster who kind of runs this American Life style podcast, he hears of this and he decides to look into it and figure out what happened to Sadie. And it's just a really moving story. The characters are super flawed, but they've also been through so much hell. Sadie isn't the most likable person, but that's what I love about her. She feels real and she's just rough around the edges. I feel like she puts herself into dangerous situations, so I was worried about her the whole way through. This is the book that got me back into reading. I pretty much read it in a day. I was just so engulfed in this story. It was so well written, and I've heard that the audiobook is even better because it's like you're listening to a real podcast, and I think that element was super fun to read from. It felt like I was listening to Serial, the podcast, and I think it's great for fans of true crime and just fans of mysteries in general. I think that this story is not fun. It's very sad. It will punch you in the face and make you feel like crap, but that's what I love about it. I love it. It made me just want to lay down and cry. And sometimes that's good for me. Sometimes you need that, you know? And there you have it. Those are all of the books written by women that I love. I have so many more books on my TBR that I need to read desperately. I find that I tend to read a lot from male authors, especially in the horror genre, but there are so many talented female authors in the horror and mystery thriller genre that I need to read more of them. It's Octavia Butler, Kindred. Her book Kindred is on my list. I'm currently reading the book Waif by Samantha Kolsnick. It is really weird and dark, but I am so mesmerized by it. It's about this woman who's in this unhappy marriage, and she meets this man at a grocery store, and she decides that he's the man she's supposed to spend the rest of her life with. She becomes obsessed with him, and it's going to weird places. I don't want to know more, but I'm telling you, I'm loving it. I'm loving the weirdness. There's just so many. So please let me know, what are your favorite horror or thriller books written by women that I need to read. I desperately need to read. Tell me if you like the books that I recommended on this list. And yeah, let's just chat in the comments. Let me know what you're doing. How's your month going? Leave all my social links so we can connect on there and talk about women in horror on my Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will catch you next time.